I like frameworks because I think they lead to practical interventions. So I would go back to that believing, belonging, becoming framework. How can you take some of that hard-earned money that you've accumulated and, maybe deepen those relationships or become more of the person that you want to be?
This show is dedicated to helping you strengthen your family tree and live financially free. Welcome to the Marriage, Kids, and Money podcast, everybody. This is Andy Hill, and today we're talking about how true wealth is more than just money. To help us explore this topic in more depth, I've invited author Dr. Daniel Crosby to the show today. Daniel is a psychologist and behavioral financial expert who helps organizations understand the intersection of mind and markets. He's also a father of three, a fanatical follower of the St. Louis Cardinals, and an amateur hot sauce chef. His latest book, Soul of Wealth, 50 Reflections on Money and Meaning, is available now. Welcome to the show, Daniel.
Andy, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. We'll have to get back to that hot sauce info, but we got a lot of things to talk about today. So why don't we jump right into it? Why do most of us believe that once we are rich, we're going to be happy?
Well, there's actually a host of reasons. One is evolutionary. We're very good at forecasting physical pain and pleasure, but we're really bad at forecasting psychological pain or pleasure or what makes us happy because we're really wired to survive. And the evolutionary powers that be don't care a whole lot whether we're happy or sad when we're doing that, just so long as we make it. The other thing is that we live in a capitalist society where we are all receiving hundreds and thousands of messages per day that are trying to sell us something or getting us to work harder. And it's usually wrapped in the sort of trappings of happiness. And then finally, at the risk of being a little bit self-indulgent here, I wanted to read just a quick passage from the book that talks about sort of the half-truths with money and happiness. I write, the belief that money is a tool that solves every problem is so hard to shake because it's riddled with half-truths. Money can't buy us happiness outright, but it can buy us the absence of misery. Money can't buy us love, but it can buy us chocolate and roses. Money can't buy us purpose, but it can buy us time to reflect on the meaning of life. And so I think a lot of times we over-index on money because we focus on the chocolate and the roses and not maybe what we have to do personally to get the girl to fall in love with us. It's easier to do to focus on the money than to focus on changing ourselves.
Yeah, it's very true. And I'm glad you spoke about it with the realization that sometimes money can buy us happiness, especially when we talk about maybe the lower end of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Would you agree?
Yeah, I do agree that the research I cover in depth in the book, but the research is fascinating. Money is really good at buying us the absence of misery because at low levels of wealth, right, you're hungry, you're cold, you hear gunshots at night, your kids don't go to a safe school, you can't afford medical care. So what we see is that there is a dramatic rise when you move from low levels of wealth to moderate levels of wealth. There is a dramatic rise in happiness. Once you get past that sort of, call it middle class income, though, things start to get a little more nuanced. We know that 15% of 15% of people are sort of unhappy at any income level. So they have a different problem, right? We've all met people like that where, it's like they need to change their attitude or change their situation or get professional help, but it's not a financial consideration. And then we also know that the way that we save and spend and invest our money can dramatically impact our happiness. People who spend money on experiences over things have more happiness. People who spend money in ways that are pro-social or bring further connectedness are happier. One of my favorite studies I talk about in the book, if Andy, if you just went out tomorrow, what's your favorite car? Like if you could have any car, what would you get?
Oh, I'm not much of a car guy, but I really like let's call it the I really like the Rivian right now, that maybe that SUV Rivian. It's very expensive.
Very
And it's one of
expensive.
those things where I just have in my brain being like, that's probably not something I will buy in the near future, but I like it.
Yeah. So let's say Andy goes out tomorrow and buys the Rivian.
Yeah.
The research shows it buys you a couple of weeks of happiness, which is brutal because a Rivian costs, I don't know, 100
Yeah,
grand plus.
probably.
Yeah. So yeah, you're spending 30 grand a week for happiness. That's not a great trade-off. But if Andy buys the Rivian to join the Rivian Club of your hometown, then there is a great deal of happiness because you bought yourself, some buddies to drink coffee with on Saturday, and folks to go on vacation with, and folks to, talk about electric vehicles with. So people who spend money in pro-social ways are happier. And then finally, people who buy back their time or get out of work they hate are happier. If you don't like doing your taxes, hire an accountant. If you don't like doing your investments, hire an advisor. If you don't like mowing your lawn, that's mine, right? Hire the high school kid to do it. This actually buys a lot of happiness. So money isn't everything, but there certainly are ways that we can buy happiness with money, especially if we're cognizant of them and we spend it right.
Yeah, and it's almost like you need to allow yourself the time to recognize those areas that are bothering you or you don't want to do, or the things that do make you happy. But we're all so busy just going forward with our days that we don't take that time. Would you agree?
I do agree. I think a lot of times we get that modern culture really lionizes busyness. If you think about even how we talk to each other, how you been? Oh, good, busy. We just sort of lead with that now, and it's easy to get swept up in the day to day, not to be very thoughtful about money, and then not spend it in the most efficient ways for your own meaning, purpose, or happiness.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about your story a little bit, Daniel. I always like to get a little personal if you're open to it. Did you ever struggle with the pursuit of money over meaning or purpose in your life?
I mean, I continue to struggle, and in a very real sense, I write books to figure out both what I believe and how I should be living my life. For me, it's a deeply personal thing. And as someone who works in finance, I'm sort of exposed to worries about money in a way that I wouldn't be perhaps if I did something else. I sort of always have to keep tabs on money and think about and talk about money. And honestly, I'm a little jealous of people who can just sort of put it on the back burner and go about their lives a little bit. So yeah, I definitely have and do struggle with this. And I think my biggest struggle has been the lie that I talk about, that I'll be happy when, I'll be happy when I hit this number or when I achieve this financial goal. And that's just a mirage that keeps disappearing every time. Right as I'm arriving, that mirage sort of disappears, and that's very typical.
Yeah. And as far as goals are concerned, because we talk about goals a lot on our podcast, retirement or financial independence, or however you'd like to term it, uh, could be that goal point for a lot of people. And you're saying if you don't have the other things going on right, this might not be the end all be all. Is that right?
And that's exactly right. In the first chapter of The Soul of Wealth, I talk about sort of these 5 pillars of happiness, what the research shows us, these 5 things that make life joyful and sort of worth living. Money only does one of them really well. The rest are like meaning and purpose, personal growth, strong relationships, and deep work that you love. The fifth one is fun and leisure. Money is absolutely great at that. Like, I mean, you can have a lot of fun with money. You can buy cool toys, you can go on beautiful vacations, but the other four, that's kind of still on us. So it's easy to fixate on the fun and leisure, but to forget about the other four.
Yeah. Did you have a point in your life where you were pursuing the wealth, maybe the net worth goals or things like that, or the retirement goals, and then something happened in your life where you said, this isn't what I need it to be. I need to be pursuing more purpose and meaning. Did that happen at any point in your life? And I guess what was the turning point?
Well, there's a couple of examples I'd give. In an iterative way, I'm always trying to check back in with myself. And I'm lucky to have a dad who's a financial advisor who is my financial advisor, who always asks me if I'm putting first things first. And that's like faith and family and sort of more fundamental considerations. And so it's really good for me that I have that sort of incremental course correction along the way, because I think if left to our own devices, most of us sort of drift, and it's easy to drift in the direction of career, career, career. And candidly, you get a lot of strokes for that. You get a lot of approval for that. You get money, which is nice. And nobody's gonna fuss at you for working hard. Like maybe your spouse and your kids, but the rest of the world will clap while you sort of slowly abandon the things in your life that mean the most to you. But the other experience I had with this was I was actually a missionary for my church for 2 years, where I couldn't make money. You're just sort of focused on the work, and it was a really singular experience to be not even able to think about money. It was just a non-issue for 2 years, and that's not an experience that I think a lot of people have, where money is just sort of not a consideration. And honestly, that was really nice to just to just be able to focus on doing bigger, more important things, and to sort of leave money behind for a time.
Yeah, I think this is fantastic. I guess I would say if somebody's listening right now and they're saying, well, I know it's important to build wealth, but I know it's also important to seek this meaning. How do I find that balance?
So I'm doing a lot of research on meaning and purpose right now in preparation for whatever my next book is. And when I tell people this, they sort of go cross-eyed a little bit, because the idea that we could even put our finger on what purpose looks like,
Mm,
it seems almost too big to get your arms around. But when you look at the psychological literature on this, there's really three things that purpose entails. And so I'll talk about each of those three things. I hope this is a useful framework, and then we can talk about how money fits in. It's the three B's. The first B is believing. So people who rate their lives as being meaningful tend to have a rule book. It could be religion or spirituality. It could be a personal moral code or a philosophy. Um, but they have some sort of sense making tool for thinking about the world, right? And so figuring out what your most deeply held beliefs are is sort of the first step along the path to purpose. Money, candidly, not a big help there. I mean, it could buy you it could buy you a philosophy book or something, but that's about it. The second one is belonging. And this is the one that's most important and most fundamental. You need to matter to someone, and you need to have people who matter to you. This is back to relationships. And so, I'll go back to our car club example. There's ways that you can spend money or focus on money to the exclusion or to the detriment of your relationships. And there's ways that you can spend money or pursue money that strengthen your relationship. So if you want to live a life of meaning and purpose, look for ways to spend your money to improve your ties with the people who matter to you. There's literally no better use of money. And then the third one is becoming. Humankind is wired for growth. We want to be better tomorrow than we were today. We want to always be growing and achieving and climbing mountains. And so spending money on, coaching or therapy or a personal trainer or going back to school, getting in shape, whatever it is, this is a really powerful use of money to become more of who you want to be. And in the Soul of Wealth, I even talk about this reciprocal relationship between self improvement and increased earning power. Men who go to therapy make 12% more than their same education peers who don't. It's 8% for women, which is still impressive. But Andy, guys are more messed up. So
Yeah. Yeah.
we need the help more. But people who have a mentor uh, are more likely to get promoted. People who exercise are more likely to get promoted and tend to make more money. So in a lot of ways, as we pursue this believing, belonging, becoming, there's going to be a positive reciprocal relationship with our professional pursuits as we figure out who we want to be, what we believe, and who we want to matter to. It can help life and work.
I like that. Spending more time focusing on meaning and personal improvement and the B's, as you talked about, should take priority over maximizing wealth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that. Now, you wrote a book, and you've included some stories or parables per se that highlight these types of things. I'm a big fan of parables because it helps to bring things home for me a little bit, so I can grab onto them. Did you have a favorite that you might be able to share that kind of has this intersection of building wealth and finding happiness?
It's hard to choose, but I'm gonna, there's 50 essays in the book, and each one of them sort of starts out with a parable or a lesson from history. I'll talk about one. One of the things that we see is that people who are good with money are what psychologists like myself would call socially indifferent, which is that they have a strong sense of themselves and they're not easily swayed by peer pressure, and they don't care what other people think. And so, they don't care about keeping up with the Joneses, or they don't care, who's flocking into the next big meme coin or tech stock. They're sort of running their own race, and they have a strong sense of themselves. I used, admittedly, kind of an over the top example for this one. I used Nikola Tesla, who was quite a weirdo. I mean, this guy was obsessed with pigeons. He never got married because he thought that would interfere with his work. He was obsessed with the number 3. He would circle buildings, 3 times before entering them. He would fold napkins in multiples of 3 before he would eat his dinner. So he would fold like 18 napkins before he would eat dinner. So just a very odd duck, as we say in the South. But he had a sense of himself, and he was sort of unashamed of his quirks, and that allowed him to pursue his own personal brand of genius. So you don't have to be as weird as Tesla to be successful, but I do think you need a strong sense of who you are and a commitment to not being swayed from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're a father of
Mhm.
3, as I talked about at the top of the show. Do you discuss building wealth and finding meaning with your children? And if so, how do you do that?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I think first and foremost, what my wife and I try to do is to model good behavior. As I think any parent certainly understands, kids are very smart and very tuned into hypocrisy. And so I think anytime that kids see daylight between what you're teaching them and how you're acting, I think they're quick to seize on that and to sort of exploit that. So I try to model good behavior, try to model putting them first and not letting my career get in the way of more fundamental considerations. Beyond that, I think my wife and I both look for organic teaching opportunities. And, with respect to money, one of these things that's so fascinating is it's just everywhere. Like it touches every part of our lives. And so there's no shortage when you're at the grocery store, right? And you're talking about comparing name brands to store brands, or organic versus, traditional, and just why does this cost this? Why does this cost this? Um, Talking about how everything works and the business realities that brought them to bear, and why do they prefer one brand over the other. I had a cool moment with my son at the farmers market the other day. We try to go to the farmers market whenever we can, and he noticed that the spaghetti sauce that I was buying at the farmers market was dramatically more expensive than the kind we get at the store, which he is, correct. And he said, "Well, why wouldn't you just go buy it at the store?" And it allowed me to speak to him about something that I write about in the book, which is that your money is your vote. And the way that you spend your money is a vote for the kind of world you want to live in. So for me, paying whatever 12 or 13 bucks for spaghetti sauce on a Saturday morning is a vote for beautiful Saturday mornings in a walkable neighborhood in a lovely downtown near my home, and not trying to maximize, I'm optimizing for beauty and joy. I'm not optimizing for cheapness. And so we just try and look for those organic teaching opportunities every day. I find they land a lot better than sort of, sit down and open up because here comes some financial education.
Yeah. Yeah, that definitely more so flies over my 12-year-old daughter's head a lot more lately, especially when it's doling out advice. But I'm all about being the great example that you want your kids to be and showcasing it on a daily basis. Now, we've talked a lot about wealth and maybe people's classic definition of wealth. Being a father, how would you define generational wealth, and maybe what's included in generational wealth in your eyes?
So I hear this term generational wealth so much lately, and I see a lot of people striving for it, and I find it a little misguided. And this is why. The way that generational wealth, in terms of just a big pile of money, is defined by a lot of people. When I was putting the book together, I tried to look for things that were true across time and across cultures. I wanted this book to be as evergreen as possible. And one of the things that you see is that in every culture, everywhere in the world, there is this idea of shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. That basically, like, the first generation, makes it, the second generation spends it. And by the third generation, you're back to, working on the railroad or whatever. You're back to, you're sort of back to being blue collar again. And that is true. Even when you look at the greatest fortunes ever made, there was a great story that Morgan Housel tells about a gathering of Vanderbilts in the 70s. So this is not too many decades, past when the patriarch of the family had passed away. There wasn't one single millionaire among all of the Vanderbilts. And if you think about how money grows and how money compounds, like, there should have been many billionaires in that mix, and there wasn't one single millionaire. So I think if you are looking to create generational wealth, which I think is a lovely impulse that people just want to do right by their families, but if you think that the pile of money that you make today is going to be around 5, 6, 7 generations from now, the likelihood of that is vanishingly small. But I look back at my own family, my grandfather, who grew up on a peanut farm, the first in his family to go to college, and the way that he set up, my mom, and the way that they set me up, and the way that I'm setting my kids up. I think lessons around treating people well, living a good life, living meaningfully, being kind, working hard, getting all the education you can, that kind of stuff endures. Overcoming generational traumas, that stuff really endures. That stuff will echo and reverberate through the generations. But if you are trying to pass down a big pile of money to your great great greats, I wish you every luck. Like, it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, and to your point, wealth in that standpoint are the lessons,
Mhm.
are the teachings, is the knowledge that you can impart, and being that example across the generations, and hopefully that will stick more than just the physical dollars themselves. Now, Daniel, somebody's listening and they are really happy about this conversation, and it's giving them some thoughts and pause around maybe they've just been singularly focused on building wealth and not really focusing on meaning. What's one step that they could take following this interview to maybe think about that a bit further and make a change, a positive change?
Yeah, I like frameworks because I think they lead to practical interventions. So I would go back to that believing, belonging, becoming framework. How can you take some of that hard-earned money that you've accumulated and, maybe deepen those relationships or become more of the person that you want to be? Buy yourself a sabbatical so you can write the book you've always wanted to. Take your family to Japan. Whatever that thing is for you, use that 3B meaning framework and become more of who you want to be.
I love that. That's fantastic. Now, I know you're talking about a lot of this in your new book, Soul of Wealth. Where can people connect with you and find your book?
Yeah, Soul of Wealth is sold wherever fine books are sold. And I am on LinkedIn at Daniel Crosby, PhD, and I have my own podcast called Standard Deviations.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Daniel. This was a great conversation. I really appreciate it.
I loved it, Andy. Thank you.